Hello everyone, how are you today? I hope you're well. Today this will be another slow English learning video helping you to pronounce each word and to hear British English in context. So let's discuss city life versus rural life. Well, living in a city, you have a lot of your mod cons. Mod cons, this is a phrase that means that you have a lot of convenient things close to you. So the mod cons can be things like appliances, could be a dishwasher, washing machine, a fridge. You can also have access to a laundrette. So if you don't have a washing machine, you can pop down to the laundrette and have your clothes washed. You can get your keys cut. So living in a city means that you have access to a lot of facilities. And it's very beneficial if things like convenience is very important to you. So you have a lot of things like entertainment. And let me know, what kind of things do you do in a city for entertainment? You have things like the theatre. There are many shows that you can watch in a big city, especially in a city like London. In particular, one of my favorites is The Lion King. If you get the chance to watch The Lion King, please do so. It's amazing. So you have the theatre. You can also go to small gigs. A gig is a small musical performance. You also have things like comedy shows. So you really are spoilt for choice when it comes to entertainment, both on a small scale but also on a big scale. You can have many music festivals, many art festivals, and different types of architecture. So in a city, they would like to promote things like the arts and culture by having unique buildings, unique architecture. And it is quite fascinating because if you like historic buildings, especially in a city like London, you can go and visit historical buildings. And it really adds to your sense of culture, sense of education. If we compare that to rural living or living in the countryside, it's a lot different, a lot quieter. You are in touch with nature a lot more. But however, you could say that in a city, you do have nature. You do have things like parks, zoos, but in a way it's a bit more artificial. When I say artificial, it's a bit more man-made. So yes, the trees are natural, but how it's constructed is not. So going into the countryside, you're exposed to more nature that hasn't been touched. It's more natural. So let me know, what do you prefer? And try to think of some reasons as to why. And once again, we can use our linking structure. On one hand, I prefer the city or countryside. But on the other hand, I prefer this. And try to go into reasons as to why. We can think about some interesting vocabulary words we can use. So for example, we can say picturesque. So if you go into the countryside or into nature and you see a beautiful waterfall or mountain, you can say it looks picturesque. If something looks picturesque, it just looks like beautiful. It looks like it's from a picture. You can try to describe the surroundings. So the surroundings can be serene, they can be calm, they can be tranquil. If we compare that to a city, Things are a lot more chaotic, a lot more busy. And I think it's interesting to go into as much detail as you can when you are comparing both. So we spoke about convenience, living in a city, but you don't get that in the countryside. I think it has changed. I think convenience has improved in some areas, and this is because people like their creature comforts. When I say creature comforts, I'm alluding to things like having a bath, having a working shower, a working toilet. So on one hand, you want to be out in nature, but to truly be in nature means you have to give up some of your convenience. And I've experienced some of this when I've gone camping, for example. So there are different types of camping experiences you can have. You can go camping in a tent, or you can go camping and have some accommodation there, or you can go in a caravan. Each has its pros and cons. I think if you want the true experience, take a tent, and this means that you are sleeping outdoors overnight in nature, and I think it can be a good experience to try to fend for yourself. So when you fend for yourself, you have to try to think about, what am I going to eat? Where am I going to go to the toilet? How am I going to have a shower? So it forces you to be a bit more independent, and it's more like an adventure. Let me know, have you gone camping? Is it something that you enjoy? Personally, I love camping. I haven't been for some time. If you ever come to the UK, I suggest visiting Wales. They have some fantastic camping sites. And it really is a nice feeling to be out in nature, because it can put things into perspective. Another thing to consider is jobs. Many people move to the city because they have access to more jobs. If you're living in the countryside or in nature, you have to think about, what would you do for a living? I think some people live off grid. So when you live off the grid, this means that you are truly independent. So if we think about what we spend money on, it's things like your food, your rent, your utilities, your entertainment. If you live off the grid, you're not paying rent, you're not paying utilities because you're using maybe wood for fire, solar panels to collect electricity. So maybe you have a system to clean the water. So you don't need any money coming in because you're not spending money on anything. So this is something to think about. I have actually seen some videos about van life. And van life is connected to what I'm talking about, because I've seen people living in a van and traveling out to nature. So they would work in the city but live in their van, so they don't pay rent, but then they have quick access to nature because they're not having to pay for a hotel or accommodation. And that also seems to have a lot of pros, a lot of cons. Personally, I couldn't do it. It seems like it's too much work. But some of the vans that I've seen have been quite amazing. You have all of your things that you could need, like a bed, a TV, a working kitchen, a working bathroom. But then you also have to think about things like emotional connection with people. If you're living in the countryside, yes, you'd have more nature, but you'd be surrounded by less people. Now, depending on who you are, that may be a good thing or a bad thing. If you're an introvert, it may be something that you quite enjoy. However, if you are an extrovert, you may crave more human interaction. So it's quite interesting to think about, because living in a city means that you are constantly surrounded by people. But this doesn't necessarily mean that you won't feel lonely. You can be surrounded by thousands of people, but then you're not having that interaction with another person. And personally, I think having that interaction with other people is important for good mental health. It depends on the type of interaction. Is it genuine or not? A lot of the times, if the emotional interaction is not genuine, then it can lead to more problems. When you are living in the city and you're thinking about a career, you're often thinking about your career ladder, and you often have a social ladder as well. So having a career ladder means that you are starting at the bottom, and each rung of the ladder you're going up and up. And this can also apply to a social ladder. So a social ladder, this is in terms of perception, so social status. So it can be things like your wealth. How much wealth do you have? People often show this by physical possessions, things like a car, a house. So these things can, on the outside, show the social status, but you don't know the true reality. Someone living off the grid in the countryside could be a lot happier than a person that is trying to have a perception of success. So it is really interesting to think about comparing rural life and living in the countryside and in nature, and comparing that to city life. Both have their pros and their cons. Personally, for me, I love nature. I think there's something about being in nature which makes you feel calm, and it can lower your stress. But we live in a world where we need money in order to pay for our standard of living, even if it's things like healthcare. So if you're living in nature and you have a medical emergency, how will you get to a doctor? It's much more difficult. So those are things that you have to weigh up. So when you weigh something up, you are comparing the pros and the cons. And doing this is a really good exercise to come to a personal conclusion. So we can have the pros, we can have the cons, and then we can bring some of the ideas together. And along the way, we can start to discover which things are more important to us. So each person would give a different answer because a different topic or category resonates with them differently. So you can find something that you feel passionate about and try to explore that idea to then give your own personal opinion. So I want you to let me know what are some of the pros and the cons for each. Let me know what your experience has been. Do you have a certain preference and why? For example, do you love the city for the museums and the architecture and the art? Do you love nature for how it makes you feel calm and peaceful? Also, do you have any favorite spots that you'd recommend? I'd love to hear from you. So remember to watch this video next to continue to improve your fluency and vocabulary. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next lesson. Thank you and bye-bye.